Good news! Venus is moving out of Virgo and into Libra, the sign of its rulership. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and it is Thursday, August the 6th, 2026. Yes, Venus is moving into Libra, and this is going to play a big role in this video, in the sense that I'll be talking a lot about Venus moving into Libra. And yeah, I do think that it is a powerful change that many of us can benefit from. So as far as this video is concerned, I'm going to start off by looking at what's going on astrologically today, in a general sense. Then I will look at Venus in Libra and think about what it might mean, and then I will move on and look at the 12 signs. And for pretty much all of the 12 signs, I will consider how Venus in Libra is going to impact them, and then I will finish this video with an I Ching reading. So let's start off at looking at today. So here is the chart for today, Thursday, August the 6th. I've set this for noon New York time, and throughout the day the moon is moving through Taurus. There you go. There's the moon at 21 degrees Taurus. So it's coming to the end of the sign. The moon is going to move into Gemini quite soon. Tomorrow, it will be there. And so, the usual things about moon in Taurus. The moon is exalted in Taurus, so it functions pretty well in this sign. Taurus is an earth sign. It's quite sort of down to earth. When we say down to earth, well, that might be about money and material thing, but it's also about physicality. There is something physical and tactile about moon in Taurus, wanting to get close to people, wanting to touch, wanting to hug and all that kind of stuff. That can be sort of moon in Taurus, feeling that one wants to be in close contact. That's the way it is, isn't it? I don't have moon in Taurus, but I think that's the way it can manifest. So the question is, what is the moon doing in Taurus? Well, it's really making a square to the sun. So you can see that the sun is at 14 degrees Leo. So at the beginning of the day, actually, the moon was square the sun. And broadly speaking, this is a last quarter moon. So we had a new moon some time ago. I think that new moon was in Cancer, and this lunar cycle has developed. We had a full moon about a week ago, and in a week's time we've got another new moon. We've got a new moon eclipse, total eclipse. Something to look forward to. What's that? It's on the 12th, isn't it? 12th of August. But now the lunar cycle is certainly coming to a close, and the lunar cycle is now sort of kind of gone into its final crisis with this last quarter moon. Well, what are we going to do? This lunar cycle is nearly over. We have to do something. And you can think, well, Sun in Leo square Moon in Taurus. Well, Sun in Leo, it's quite a proud position for the Sun to be in its own sign. Perhaps Sun in Leo has a high opinion of itself, and believes that it deserves respect, and it can be a bit of entitlement about the Sun in Leo. And so this means that Moon in Taurus is perhaps challenging the Sun in Leo. It's all very well to have these big ideas. It's all very well to think we're wonderful, but we have to perhaps do something practical, hence Moon in Taurus, something down to earth. And, we can't just live on cloud nine. We can't just rely on our natural fire. We do have to bring things down to earth, and perhaps that's what the moon in Taurus is asking us to do. And another aspect taking place today is a quintile between Mars and Saturn. And you could argue that this Mars quintile Saturn kind of supports the last quarter moon. It kind of has a similar meaning. So when you're talking about a quintile, that's a 72 degree aspect, which is 1/5 of the circle. And it is what we are trying to create, what we are trying to make happen, and it can be very much connected with our will. And with Mars quintile Saturn, we might feel that just things aren't intense enough. Things are perhaps a bit sloppy. Perhaps we feel sloppy. Perhaps we're just being a bit complacent. Maybe other people are being complacent. And so we might have to change the situation, create a bit of difficulty, a bit of tension. And that might be how Mars quintile Saturn works. So we deliberately raise the pressure. We may deliberately create worries and concerns. If you keep on doing this, well, something bad might happen. Mars quintile Saturn. And this might be reflected in the whole way we come across. It kind of depends who you are, but some people like to like to wear black, funereal black, or they like to have something rather sort of pale and deathly about them. Well, Mars and Saturn as a pair can be about death. I'm not saying it is about death, but it's more about sort of aligning to sort of deathly themes, and it might be a way to change the tone of things. Mars quintile Saturn might be deliberately creating, sort of the memento mori, sort of a reminder that, all of us are mortal. We have these memento moris. Okay, we could literally have a skull on our desk just to remind us that, we're going to get there soon. We could do that. So, that might be a way in which Mars quintile Saturn could work. But there's just a seriousness there which we are almost deliberately trying to play up. And it might be reflected in what we say and what we do, or maybe about what other people say, what other people do. People, I don't know, they want to talk about bad news. They want to talk about, I don't know, some terrible thing that's been happening in the world. And they want to talk about it, want to, get people's attention. So that could well be how the Mars quintile Saturn is working. And now I want to talk about Venus in Libra. Before I talk about Venus in Libra, just a quick look at the positions of the planets. If you set the chart for Sydney, Australia, or New Zealand, or East Asia. I mean, Sydney, Australia is a sort of a convenient place to set the chart. And so there's not really much to point out here. The moon is in the middle of Taurus, so you can see in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, the moon is going to be in Taurus, throughout the day. That last quarter moon that I was talking about, if you were in the Americas, for example, that last quarter moon, the immediate phase of that last quarter moon, when the sun and the moon were exactly 90 degrees, was starting to pass. You were moving to the next stage, and that was starting to break up. But if you are in Australasia, the sun and the moon are exactly square. So that feeling of crisis, that something has to be done, or otherwise it's going to be too late, may be sort of stronger in Australia than in New Zealand than in other parts of the world. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And there is a quintile, no, not a quintile, a quincunx between Venus and Mars. So Venus is in 26 Sagittarius, Mars is at 26 Taurus. So quincunx between Venus and Mars, that might say something about relationships and just how people get on. And quincunx can suggest a certain uneasiness. I mean, we know that, astrologically, we've recently had a square, geocentrically, we've had a square between Venus and Mars. I mean, that Venus and Mars is still there. I think once Venus moves into Libra, that's going to make the Venus-Mars square sort of less of a thing, but it's still around for most of the day. And yeah, with Venus quincunx Mars, it just may be that we can't get on with everyone, and it's kind of very clear that we can't get on with everyone. It's just something that really can't be helped, and so that is a way of certainly a way of looking at things. And Earth and Pluto, in fact, if you look at Earth and Pluto, Pluto's at 4 degrees Aquarius, Earth is at 14 degrees Aquarius. So they're exactly 10 degrees apart. So if it's 10 degrees apart, I mean, sorry to be obscure, but that is a square on a ninth harmonic. At 10 degrees. Well, that's that's a 36 of the circle, isn't it? So if you think there are 36 is 4 times 9, so yeah, that's going to be a square on the ninth harmonic. And so from a heliocentric point of view, with Earth making that square, it could be about the not more than a desire, just really wanting in a sort of a spiritual sense to transform things, to transform our environment. The Earth is the Earth. It's where we sit. It's our planet, and it's making a square on a ninth harmonic to Pluto. We're almost feeling that there's sort of a spiritual urge to transcend things. It's almost about what is bliss. Bliss is being able to create change, but creating this change is not easy. It's a real effort. So we're sort of looking for that blissful change. We just know, or we feel, that if things could change, if things could be transformed, that things would be so much better, or at least that might be how it feels. And now I want to turn to Venus moving into Libra. So here is the time of Venus moving into Libra. So Venus moves into Libra at 8:12:46 p.m. London time on today, so this evening. I got that time from Astro.com, because if you go to Astro.com or you look up ephemerides and Astro.com, it just tells you all the times in which you can go for. There's a page on, or a set of PDFs on the Venus cycle, and it says that sort of universal time, that Venus goes into Libra today at, universal time, it goes in at 7:12:46. So let's just add the hour to give us British summer time, as this is a chart set for London. So Venus has been in Virgo for some time, and the thing about Venus being in Virgo is that Venus is fallen in Virgo. Yeah, it's not a great sign for Venus to be in. I mean, it's not necessarily disastrous. Venus does rule the earth signs, by day, so Venus has a certain dignity in Virgo, but it's not great. And then it kind of transforms. It moves from being in its fall to being in its own sign. So if you think about that from a points system, if you look at William Lilly's point system, he would say that he would probably say that, forget terms and faces. If you ignore terms and faces, he would say that Venus gets -4 points for being fallen, but it kind of gets +3. It may get +3 points for being in its own sign. Sorry, in its own triplicity. some of the time, if it's a daytime chart, but we'll assume it is a daytime chart. So you could argue that Venus is getting is kind of might score -1 or perhaps -4, depending on how you look at it. And then it switches. The moment it moves to Libra, suddenly it's +5. So you could say that it suddenly switches suddenly gets 9 extra points, or at least 6 extra points. So it's a big change for Venus. And Venus is the planet of good luck. It's the lesser benefic, and so that may say something just about the world in which we're living. People being optimistic about stuff. I mean, I know there's a lot of pessimism around, but maybe Venus in Libra is going to change people's attitude. I mean, I'm trying to be positive here. I mean, why not? And so I think in general, it's definitely something to welcome. But the thing about Venus in Libra is that it may be about making hay while the sun shines, because while it is true that Venus is strong, the signs of decay are already there, and those signs of decay are represented by the fact that Venus is slowing down, at least relative to the Earth. It is slowing down. Venus, it goes into Libra today, August the 6th. It stays in Libra until September the 10th. So it spends over a month in Libra. And that's kind of longer than expected, because normally, geocentrically, Venus, you'd expect Venus to move faster than the sun, but it is slowing down. And so Venus hits its kind of peak, wonderful in Libra, but the seeds of its decay are already there because it's slowing down. And then on September the 10th, moves into Scorpio. Another dramatic change. Venus moving from being in its own sign to being in its detriment. So there's a massive fall in the essential dignity of Venus when it moves into Scorpio on September the 10th. And then on October the 3rd, while in Scorpio, Venus goes retrograde. And so its position, really is poor, and so they just, bear all of that in mind, and that goes back to what I was saying, making hay while the sun shines. So I think we should really try to use Venus, while things are good. Don't be lazy. Take advantage of it. It's all things being equal, is looking good. So. What else can we say about Venus? What is going on particularly with Venus? Like, right now, where does Venus lie in terms of, the rest of the planets, other planets going on? Well, Venus is making a semi-square to the Sun. I did a video quite recently on the fact that Venus is making a semi-square to the Sun. There is a certain lack of ease here with Venus semi-square of the Sun. We perhaps are aware how we could be undermined. I mean, the Sun might represent an undermining force. It's quite a strong Sun, but I think it's easier than it used to be, because we did have Venus in Virgo semi-square of the Sun. So Venus in Virgo, not very strong, semi-square of the Sun in Leo. But now Venus is in Libra semi-square of the Sun. So you could say that, Venus in Libra can sort of look after itself. And talking about the signs, Venus in there are two signs in which Venus rules, Taurus and Libra. And you could say that Libra represents the active manifestation of Venus, while Taurus is kind of more passive. Libra is a positive masculine sign, and it's perhaps sort of more outward going. It's more thinking about what it wants to do to create change, and it wants to perhaps to have an impact, and perhaps more so than Venus in Taurus. I mean, you might disagree with that. I mean, Venus in Taurus can be really very determined. When it wants something, it can very often get it. So maybe one shouldn't necessarily make that kind of distinction. But Venus is making an opposition to Neptune, and that is going to certainly colour Venus as it moves into Libra. And in fact, Venus is going to kind of link up with Barbo's basket, because Venus will make a trine to Uranus. It will make and a trine to Pluto. I mean, Uranus is no longer at 4 degrees; it's now at 5 degrees Gemini. Pluto is at 4 degrees Aquarius. Of course, you've got Neptune at 4 degrees Aries. So, Venus is going to link up with all of these outer planets, and you're going to have a grand trine. And I think that the moment Venus moves into Libra, we're going to start to feel that grand trine. And, it's quite an exciting energy. Things are moving. We're thinking about the future. It's in an air sign. It's about ideas and concepts, about possibilities. And so I think it might, to an extent, be something to look forward to. And then, there is a question of, what midpoints is Venus on? Well, you could say, well, one thing, it's obviously opposition the Aries point, so it's next to the Aries point. And so if we look at Venus in terms of the 90-degree dial, let's see what we can find. So there is the 90-degree dial. So you see, there is Venus at the Aries point. That's where it is. Venus is in the same place as the Aries point. So Venus shares all the same midpoints as the Aries point does. So looking at some of the midpoints that Venus is on. I mean, Venus is it's on the Moon Jupiter midpoint. I mean, Moon Jupiter is it's quite a happy, optimistic place for Venus to be on. So I think that for many of us, Venus on the Moon Jupiter, could feel just things are just happier, things are moving more, and so there's a lot to be perhaps pleased about. And aside from that, it is on the Mars Neptune midpoint. So with Venus on the Mars Neptune midpoint, that it could be quite deluded in its own way. I mean, Mars Neptune is about kind of going in the wrong direction, being tempted off the path. I like to associate Mars Neptune with sleaze, maybe even criminality, doing things that are not necessarily very pleasant, but being attracted by the glamour and the bright lights, and perhaps being led astray. So there could be problems there, and it's on the Uranus Zeus midpoint. You see, there is Zeus, there's Uranus. So Venus on the Uranus Zeus midpoint. Well, Venus, as I like to argue, can be the planet of war. And that might sound controversial, but I think that it can be associated with victory, looking for victory. In the Greek pantheon, you'd see it would be Nike, or in the Roman, the Latin equivalent would be Victoria. And so if you think about Uranus Zeus, I mean, Uranus and Zeus are a very sort of explosive pairing. Zeus can be because Zeus is a hypothetical planet, one of the Vita's original 4 hypothetical planets. Yeah, it can be quite explosive. And of course, Uranus speaks for itself. It is very explosive. So Venus is about the idea of victory through sudden action. It could be the fantasy of victory. I don't know who has the fantasy. Maybe something to do with the ongoing wars we have at the moment. So there is one aspect of that. Someone maybe looking for victory through a sudden action, through some big explosion, or this is going to... and that might be just, also just thinking about explosions. Explosions are something to be... welcomed, not very nice, and also Venus on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. That perhaps just getting the wrong idea about things. But with Venus on the Moon-Jupiter midpoint, I think that there is the capacity for happiness there. I think I would have said, and the excitement there, because we've got, it's not, we're going back to Uranus and Zeus. We've got Mercury and Zeus being pretty close together. We've got Uranus, so you've got Venus on the Mercury, not just on the Zeus-Uranus midpoint, but also on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint as well. And that may be an essential part of it. Mercury-Uranus is, about ideas, having good ideas, wanting to talk about these ideas. It can be quite inspired. And so perhaps if we want to be really positive about it, Venus on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, we meet people, we talk to people, we get involved with art. Venus is a planet of art, and we have great ideas, great artistic ideas, and we can talk about our creativity, and we can be quite inspired. And finally, when you've got Venus crossing the Aries point, or opposition the Aries point, that particular moment may have its own magic, may have its own power. And you could say that, okay, whenever Venus crosses a cardinal point, whether it's Aries or Libra or Capricorn or Cancer, you'd expect something to happen. So approximately every 3 months, Venus crosses a cardinal point. But maybe for Venus, the Venus hitting the Libra point, Venus being conjunct Libra, Venus being at 0 degrees Libra. So if we set a horoscope for the precise moment that Venus is conjunct Libra, this might tell us something important, not just for the next few months, but maybe for the next year or, even longer. So I had that idea. So I'm just going to give you, a few examples. So if we look, for example, at when Venus went into Libra in 1938. I know, that's a long time ago. So here is Venus moving into Libra in 1938. And this was the time before, because the 1st of September 1939 was, of course, when Germany invaded Poland. But this was setting up the time between the next year and more. And so this is the moment that Venus entered Libra in 1938, set for Warsaw. And you can see here that the IC was at 1734 Taurus, and Uranus was at 1744 Taurus. So Uranus was exactly on the IC if you set the Venus's Libra ingress to Warsaw, and that kind of indicated that over that period between Venus's ingress into Libra in 1938 and it's the next ingress, which was after the invasion of Poland, you could say that Warsaw might have been really under a lot of pressure. And this might have been a dangerous time for Poland. And turning to a few years later, there was, let's go to 1941. So August the 21st, 1941, Venus went into Libra. And so here's the chart. I set it for Pearl Harbor. And so this was Venus moving into Libra just a few months before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And the midheaven was at 28 degrees Virgo. So Venus was quite close to the midheaven, but Neptune was close to the midheaven as well. So there was a Venus-Neptune conjunction on the midheaven. And of course, it was a very Neptunian event, Pearl Harbor. You know, the sinking of all those ships was really quite clear. And plus, there was Jupiter on the descendant. So Jupiter on the descendant in Gemini, in its detriment, could kind of indicate an attack. So, you know, I think there is evidence here that it might be worth just looking at the precise moment that Venus moved into Libra, because it might tell us something important. Then a couple of years later, if we look at Venus moving into Libra on September the 3rd, 1944, and we set the chart for Nagasaki, we see that Uranus is exactly on the midheaven. If we set the chart for Hiroshima, we'll also see Uranus pretty close to being the midheaven, on the midheaven. And I did do a video which I put out a day or two ago regarding why I think the Hiroshima chart is important. Not many people have watched the video. Maybe it's not of any interest, but the point I make about the Hiroshima chart is that if you look at the Hiroshima chart, if you haven't watched that video, let me just show you the Hiroshima, the chart of the bombing of Hiroshima, is that Uranus is exactly on the midheaven when the bombs were released from the Enola Gay. And so you go back to, there it is, exactly on the midheaven, and the bomb exploded, I think, 44 seconds later. And so if you set the chart for Nagasaki, you again see Uranus on the midheaven. And so maybe Venus in Virgo, that precise moment, just may tell us a lot about what's going on between then and the next time Venus moves into Libra. Now, if you set the chart for Hiroshima, it's pretty similar. You'll still get Uranus fairly close to the midheaven, not as close as it is on Nagasaki. Also, Mercury is pretty close to the ascendant, both for Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And look at, I know True Black Moon Lilith is doing something as well on the ascendant, set for Nagasaki, and other events that one might want to consider. For example, if you look at 9/11. So here is Venus moving into Libra on August the 31st, 2000. And so I know this is a long time before 9/11, but Venus doesn't go into Libra again before 9/11. And so if you set this chart for New York, you see that Mars is on the IC, Jupiter's on the ascendant, and of course 11 degrees Gemini, that is the degree of the United States ascendant, because the United States ascendant is about 11, 12 Sagittarius. So the descendant, that kind of indicates perhaps an attack. And you've got Chiron on the 7th house cusp, and you've got Uranus on the midheaven. So you've got Uranus on the midheaven, you've got Mars on the IC, Jupiter on the ascendant, and Chiron a Chiron Pluto conjunction on the descendant. So I think that that is a good argument for thinking that maybe we should be looking at the charts for when Venus moves, that exact moment when Venus moves into Libra. So looking at Venus moving into Libra, like right now, what should we be looking for? We can do an astrocartography for Venus in Libra, so let's go do that. Let's just set up a map for that. Just seeing if there's anywhere of interest. So, I mean, one thing that, immediately one sees with this is that, here is the Uranus on the Uranus on the IC line, and remember, Uranus was on the IC, and when Venus went into Libra immediately prior to, at least the Venus moving into Libra, the one just before, or quite a long time before, the German invasion of Poland, and Uranus was on the IC, if you'd set that chart for Warsaw. And so at that time, these are all the places where Uranus is on the IC. I mean, sort of parts of sort of Africa and sort of Algeria, but, it goes through Catalonia. It looks like Catalonia, is it, or somewhere like that, and goes through western France. Seems to go through pretty close to Paris, and it seems to go through London. So I think that London might be, and the UK in general, might be a part of a world that really could be impacted by Venus moving into Libra. I mean, other places that you might want to consider is, there's Cuba. Uranus is on the descendant set for Cuba. I don't know what Donald's plans are for Cuba, whether he really thinks he can engineer any sort of regime change in that country. I mean, who knows? Well, I suppose I should know because I'm the astrologer, aren't I? Maybe I'll need to look at Cuba's chart more. And then, there's a line here. This is a Saturn conjunct the ascendant line. This kind of could be interesting. It sort of does go through Israel, and goes through goes through eastern Ukraine. Maybe we should be looking here at this part of the world, the Red Sea. I don't know whether the conflict is going to spread to the Red Sea. I mean, obviously that is an alternative conduit of oil, so that's something we should be thinking about. Yeah, and from an Israeli perspective, that goes pretty close towards sort of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and it also goes through Turkey. I mean, Ankara would be what Ankara is about here. So Ankara, the capital of Turkey, is relatively close to that line. So those are a few places to consider. And so, I mean, the one that kind of stands out is London. Of course, I have a certain bias because although I haven't been back to the UK since the beginning of 2016, I still are kind of sort of interested in what is happening. This chart is set for London. And so if you set the precise moment that Venus moves into Libra for London, you see that Pluto is exactly on the ascendant. You've got Jupiter exactly on the descendant. You've got Uranus exactly on the IC. Now, Uranus on the IC, does that indicate some kind of attack? Is Britain in danger? I mean, where would that attack come from? I mean, there's a lot of speculation, isn't there, that if Western countries, NATO countries, keep supporting Ukraine, keep providing intelligence and targeting information for Ukrainian drone attacks, that in the end Russia will feel that it has no choice but to retaliate on Western countries. So, for example, I don't know, is that an Oreshnik landing on some factory in the UK, I don't know, which makes some kind of weapon system. I mean that is a possibility. I think it's probably still a far-fetched possibility, and it may say something instead that this is a country that is not necessarily particularly at ease with itself. But Uranus on the IC kind of indicates that if this system works, if you can really set a chart for Venus conjunct Venus moving across the Aries point, that that sometime between now and Venus next moving into Libra, which isn't so far. Well, it's actually quite a long way. Again, let me just tell you, when does Venus next move into Libra? After this, I should be able to tell you. That's something I should have looked up. So Venus goes retrograde, as I said, on October the 3rd. It goes back as far as 22 degrees Libra. Venus next will be at 0 degrees Libra in over a year, in sort of middle of September 2027. So, in fact, this chart covers not just the next year, but the next 12, 13 months. It covers a period of over a year. And so during this period of the next year and more in the UK, I think it does look really quite difficult, and that something could happen, perhaps of the nature of Uranus on the IC. And let's not forget Pluto either, and we've kind of got this sort of grand trine forming, Venus, Uranus, Pluto. So I don't know. It doesn't look great, I don't think. Anyway, that's all I've got to say on Venus moving into Libra, and now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, August the 6th, 2026. Aries, you are someone who is not particularly contrived, are you? You're someone who is quite natural, and you like to speak openly, and you don't like to make things up or pretend to be someone that you are not. And that's the way it should be. After all, you are an Aries. But there may be times when you want to manage the impression you give, believe it or not. Now, that might sound strange. I've just said that you are someone who is natural. You're not into fakery. You're not over-stylized. But there can be times, like today, when it can be worth your while making an effort to give a particular impression. I mean, after all, you want to have maximum impact, and it may be, Aries, that it could actually be in your benefit to make a special effort to be quite tough and uncompromising, to give the impression that everything is hard work, that it might almost be a matter of life and death. And you're not just giving an impression to other people. You may want to give that impression to yourself. So even if you yourself are feeling relatively relaxed, you kind of feel that if you can come over as being somewhat tense and maybe hard-working, that might actually be quite a useful thing to do. Now, I know that's not in keeping with who you are generally, but I just do think that right now there could be an advantage in really managing the impression you give. And perhaps giving the impression that you are actually tougher than you actually are. Because you give an impression, it may not be entirely true, but that has an impression on other people. They take you more seriously. They regard you as being someone who shouldn't be messed with, and it all kind of works out. And it does seem that other people could matter, not just today, but, over the next few weeks, because, Venus is moving into Libra. Venus, has been in Virgo for some time, and now it's making that sign change. And, this sign change, it is obviously important. Libra is opposition the Aries point. Libra and Aries are opposition one another. Aries and Libra are both the sort of equinox points. So when you have Venus moving into Libra, I think that really could matter, and it might say something about other people. Now I've just said that you're trying to create a particular impression because maybe you're trying to give yourself a competitive advantage, but you you certainly shouldn't underestimate other people, because, when Venus moves into Libra, it becomes much stronger. Venus has been in Virgo. Venus in Virgo is in the sign of its fall. And so suddenly it moves into the sign of its ownership, because Venus rules Libra. And so this might be about another person, or perhaps a number of people, who, for one reason or another, you might have underestimated them, or they might have been in a temporarily weak position. But then Venus moving into Libra, suddenly someone might come into their own. You realize that this is someone who does need to be taken seriously. I mean, I know that you want to be taken seriously, which is good. You certainly should, make a real effort. I think you can make the effort to be taken seriously, and it can work. But you've also got to do the same regarding certain other people. And with Venus moving into Libra, it's possible that someone new is kind of arriving on the scene, and you might not notice it at first. But if you pay attention and you look at your whole social scene, all of the people around you, you just might notice a small change. Maybe someone has arrived, and at first it doesn't seem to be of any great significance. But over the next few weeks, as Venus moves through Libra, this person might become increasingly prominent. And so that is certainly something that you need to think about. And additionally, it is we've got a last quarter moon. So the moon is in Taurus, and the sun is in Leo, so they're square each other. So, this last quarter moon is a bit of a challenge, and I think we can perhaps see the sun as being challenged. So, the sun in Leo, from an Aries perspective, that's a great place for the sun to be. The sun, in its own sign, and the sun, does have a special relationship with Aries because the sun is exalted in Aries. But then it hits a square with the moon. So the sun in Aries, sun in Leo, lots of things sun in Leo wants to do. Sun in Leo can revel in its own power and its own creativity. But then the moon in Taurus represents something different, something that has to be taken into account of, that you kind of don't really want to take into account. It could be money. It could be that something has a financial consequence. It may be that something you're doing, isn't, fully grounded. And this last quarter moon is, a bit of a crisis. This is what I often say about first quarter moons, last quarter moons. When I say a crisis, there is a decision to be made. You see the consequences of your actions, particularly the last quarter moon, the end of the lunar cycle. And, we've got a week left or so before the new moon. And, that new moon is in Leo. We think it's a total eclipse, isn't it? But we're not there yet. So in wrapping something up, there's just perhaps something you haven't fully considered. You're doing a good job. You have a strong sense of yourself and what you can do, but there's just something else you need to consider. And it might be of a material nature. It could be something to do with money, that needs to be sorted out. Maybe you're currently doing something that has a financial consequence that just needs to be considered, and perhaps some fine-tuning is required. But really, Aries, it's nothing that you can't handle. Taurus, the moon is still in your sign. It in fact stays in your sign all day long. And the moon in Taurus, it makes a square to the sun, because we have a last quarter moon. And this last quarter moon is obviously in fixed signs. Taurus and Leo, both fixed, and it may be a bit challenging, this last quarter moon. It perhaps relates to the concepts of what happens now, what actually do you do. And one way of looking at the last quarter moon is that part of you wants to just stabilize things, make sure that everything is under control. You don't necessarily want wild adventure. You don't necessarily want a huge amount of variety. Just keep it at a fairly low level. This is the way it should be. If you're feeling good about yourself where you are, that should be enough. So there is a possibility that some Taurians may find that they're sort of limiting their horizons perhaps too much, and the moon square the sun is kind of telling you that what about you? What do you actually want? Sure, you want security, but that's a very sort of a negative thing to want. Yeah, we all want security up to a point. We all want to make sure everything is safe, but what else? What do we want to do in a sort of a constructive way? How are we going to present ourselves? And you might be concerned. You might think that you might get it wrong, that your every action might be undermining. And this last quarter moon is kind of encouraging you to have real confidence in where you're standing in terms of what you have achieved, telling yourself that it is okay to be yourself. There is actually no need to worry. It's all under control. You have got it under control. Now, a thing happening today is Venus changing sign. Now, Venus can change sign, might change sign, this evening if you're in Europe or Africa, or if you're in the Americas. Well, it might be around lunchtime, early afternoon, mid-afternoon. So it takes place, earlier in the day in Americas. And Venus changing sign matters because Venus is, of course, your ruler. And it is something of a two-edged sword. On one hand, you've had Venus in Virgo, and Venus in Virgo, that's an earth sign. It's a sign that you feel pretty comfortable with. You're able to do things that you feel happy about. You feel reasonably protected, and you understand what matters. But Venus in Virgo, maybe at times you find yourself just concentrating on the wrong things, maybe worrying too much about particular details which maybe in the grand scheme of things aren't particularly necessary. And then Venus moves into Libra. So Libra and Taurus are two really quite different signs. Okay, they've got one thing in common. They're both ruled by Venus. But, aside from that, Libra, is an air sign. You're an earth sign. You, as a Taurus, you want things to be, solid, down to earth. You don't want to spend ages and ages, analyzing things, working out, what's the phrase? How many fairies can dance on the head of a pin? Isn't that the phrase? That's can be something that Taurians say. What they're really saying is let's not analyze it too much. Too much talking. Just worrying about something without any sense of reality is really not what we should be doing. We've got to really think about what matters. But then Venus is still in Libra, and so Venus in Libra might be a little challenging. But Venus is your ruler, and with Venus moving into Libra, you're quite capable of being civilized, and there can be something a bit sort of rough, raw and crude about some Taurians. They have a few rough edges, or at least they might be perceived as having a few rough edges, and they can sometimes say things or do things which are just slightly inappropriate. But with Venus in Libra, you actually know what it takes to create the right impression. Yeah, you can be civilized. You can handle yourself in a social sense. And also with Venus moving through Libra, well, it is moving through Libra for quite a long time. In fact, for over a month. It moves into Scorpio on September the 10th. And the reason, by the way, that Venus is spending so long in Libra, because normally Venus goes through a sign in less than a month. The reason is that Venus is starting to slow down. Don't forget. And in fact, I think it's October the 3rd. Venus goes into Scorpio on October the 3rd, isn't that right? Just looking ahead, and there is also the issue of Venus going retrograde. So Venus goes retrograde. Sorry, let me get this right. Venus goes into Scorpio on September the 10th. It goes retrograde on October the 3rd. So Venus is kind of preparing to go retrograde. And, with Venus in Libra, it might be the case of, making hay while the sun shines. Because, Libra, Venus for sure is in a good position now in Libra, at least from a perspective of Western astrology. But you think about it, September the 10th, Venus changes sign, it goes into Scorpio, a sign where it is in its detriment. Then, October the 3rd, it's retrograde. And so, there's still some good things happening to Venus. Venus is going to be part of a grand trine involving Uranus and Pluto in a few days' time. It's also going to make a sextile to Jupiter. So Venus's position, it's good at the moment. Make hay while the sun shines. But Venus's position is not going to stay good. Really, from September the 10th onwards, and in fact probably earlier, its position is starting to deteriorate. But let's not worry about that right now. The point is, with Venus in Libra, it is a good time to just align yourself with everything around you. I think you're going to have just a good sense of what is possible, and you're going to be quite a good organizer. I think you can organize people quite well right now. So if you're not happy about your social scene or who's around you, you can make some changes. Maybe you'll be quite good at planning parties and creating the right environment. And if anything needs to be done, I think you're going to be quite good at sorting it out. And with Venus being in Libra, you'll just have a sort of natural sense of balance. But that doesn't mean that you're not capable of stirring things up. Your mind right now is on good form, and I think with Venus moving into Libra, that does really improve your mental capacity. And while it's true that you want to do things right, and that there's a particular way of working, a way of thinking, you are also quite inspired, and you have ideas, and the things you say can be quite inspiring, and you can get people to sit up and listen. and you can actually come over as being a person who is quite exciting, and who is also really, very interesting. That kind of links to what I was saying, with this last quarter moon. You don't have to be afraid to come out of your shell. You don't have you mustn't be afraid about being yourself. Perhaps expressing your opinions and your ideas. You might be concerned. You might think you might spoil things. You might create a false impression or create the wrong impressions. But it's not true. I think actually, Taurus, you can be yourself, and I think just if you are yourself, particularly once Venus goes into Libra, I think you can really do a good job, and you can have a really quite a favorable impact on everything and everybody around you. Gemini. The moon is still moving through Taurus. It's moving through Taurus all day. Of course, it's getting ready to move into Gemini, but you're not there yet. And as a result, you might feel somewhat constrained. It might seem that there is something that you would like to do, but you don't quite have the opportunity. It just doesn't quite come together. And it might be a question of timing. And I think right now, Gemini, your concept of timing is actually quite good. I think it's quite fine-tuned. And so if you feel that now is not the right time, then you're probably right. And it might just be a question of just waiting it out, and perhaps you can be sort of fine-tuning your plans, and you're very much aware that you're kind of living in a stop-go world. There are moments of great action, when you can do lots of things, very quickly. But then there are other times when just things do slow down, when you have to be more cautious. You have to take things, one step at a time. And it's not about you doing anything wrong. It's just being aware of the pace of other people, and also the pace of the world around you, because things might just be a bit sort of slower than usual, but you do know that things are changing. And one thing that is changing is Venus. Venus is moving out of Virgo and into Libra. And I take the view that Venus moving into Libra is something that really is a real positive, especially if you're a Gemini. Venus is moving into an air sign. It's making a trine to Uranus in Gemini. Okay, it's not making a trine to Uranus in Gemini today, but over the next few days, Venus will be moving towards that trine to Uranus in Gemini. It will also be moving towards a trine to Pluto in Aquarius, so we start to get a grand trine forming. So Gemini, things really are starting to move, and when Venus moves into Libra, which could be this afternoon if you're in the Americas, could be this evening if you're in Europe or Africa. Okay, sometime tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But when Venus moves into Gemini, it starts a period of time, lasting until September the 10th, when just things feel easier, things feel more relaxed, you're feeling more confident, you are prepared to sort of stray a bit further from what you know and trust. Because I think right now, many Geminis feel that, if they move too far from their sacred earth, then they might lose touch of what's going on, and they might get lost. But once Venus moves into Libra, I think you'll just feel just a lot better and you'll be better able to do things that are different and to be sort of more experimental. Try out new things. Not being so afraid of failure, not being so afraid of making a fool of yourself. And as soon as Venus moves into Libra, you get this grand trine forming, and things are starting to move, and that's a bit of a relief, because as I said, right now there may be times when it just does feel a little bit stop go, and everything just is taking its time to resolve. But there's a reason why things might be delayed, and if you're patient and you allow things to develop, and then I think things are going to be okay. And tomorrow, the moon does move into Gemini, so tomorrow, Friday, I think the pace of things really is going to pick up. Cancer. The moon is making a square to the sun. And that means that we have a last quarter moon. So last quarter moon, that is an important part of the lunation cycle. It is between the full moon and the new moon. So a week ago we had a full moon. That was a full moon at, what was it, 6 degrees Aquarius. And now we've got, in a week's time, we've got a new moon in Leo, which is I think it's going to total eclipse of the sun. And so here you are towards the end of a lunar cycle, and really towards the end. It may feel at times like now or never. If you're going to make the most of this lunar cycle, if you're going to actually do something, well, you better get going pretty quickly, because before you know it, the lunar cycle will be over, and you'll be into something quite new. And of course, this lunar cycle, it started with a new moon in Cancer, with a new moon in your sign. Time flies, and hopefully you've been working on something since that new moon, and now might be the time where you either get it together, or you just take the view that it's not worth trying. You've done your best and it isn't working. So yes, don't feel that you can wait. If you really want to get something finished, now might be your chance. And so with this moon square the sun, it could be, for example, that you've maybe you haven't taken advantage or full advantage of what is available, and there may have been resources which really were there for the taking. That was represented by moon in Taurus, and it might have been social resources. So, for example, you might have friends, associates, colleagues, and you haven't bothered them. You haven't wanted to bother them. You've wanted to keep things to yourself, and maybe they really had something to offer, something important to offer, and they could have helped you out perhaps in quite material ways. For example, in terms of money. I'm not necessarily talking about getting money from someone else, but maybe they had some advice about money, or advice about business, or something you could be doing which would improve your finances. But it's kind of something you don't necessarily want to do. I mean, that can be a Cancerian thing, because many Cancerians do like to keep things to themselves. I think that can be quite an important part of being a Cancer, and this is perhaps intensified by the fact that today Venus moves into Libra. Libra is a cardinal sign. Libra is therefore an important sign in the Cancer horoscope, and with Venus moving into Libra, that could say something about your personal aesthetics. What pleases you, what looks good, what makes you feel comfortable. And that might particularly relate to where you are spending your time. It could be your home or your office or wherever you feel secure, whether you're looking for some kind of security. And Venus wants it to be right. Because Venus is an ascetic sign, and it is about balance. And with Venus moving through Libra until September the 10th, the way things look like, it could really be important. It's not trivial. It's the way things are decorated, the color of the wallpaper, the color of the curtains, that kind of thing really can be important, and something for you to consider. And if something doesn't feel right, if it feels ugly, then Cancer, this might be a time to put it right. And in fact, it might be a time where your inner interior designer really comes into its own. You just see what looks good. I mean, if you actually are an interior designer, or your work involves homes and real estate in any capacity, then I think with Venus in Libra, I think you could be very good at your job. But even if that's not your job, I think you know what looks right, and you know how to organize things. You know how to decorate. You know where things should be. It's just a question of having that natural balance. Being a Cancer, you're quite a sensitive sign, and I think you can use that sensitivity to give yourself the right environment, an environment where you can really prosper. Leo. The moon is moving through Taurus. It's been moving through Taurus for some time now, getting ready to move into Gemini. So tomorrow the moon will be in Gemini. But anyway, for the moment, the moon is definitely in Taurus, and it is making a square to the sun. In other words, that means, Leo, that we have a last quarter moon. Week's time, we've got total eclipse of the sun. In other words, a new moon eclipse in your sign. I think that might be something to look forward to. I'm, in a way, looking forward to that eclipse, not least because I've got something that I can talk about, that I want to sort of describe it, astrologically. But now's not quite the time for me to be sort of waxing lyrical about that eclipse. And now we're talking about the previous stage of a moon, which is this last quarter moon. And so last quarter moon, it's in fixed signs, and it involves two very important sectors of your chart. You have sun in your own sign. You've got moon in Taurus, in a really quite sort of elevated position, at least relative to your sign, relative to Leo. And it's certainly a dynamic aspect, moon square sun, but it's an aspect that can really sort of propel you forward. So with the sun in Leo, I think that by and large you're in quite a strong position. You have a strong sense of selfhood, and I think that you're feeling pretty confident. And it's not just because the sun is in Leo, it's pretty close to Jupiter, so it benefits from that proximity to Jupiter, the great benefic. And then the moon is in Taurus. The question is, where is it all going? How do you develop it? And that's perhaps what the moon in Taurus is all about, developing something. You can feel good, but where's it all going? How are you going to project this onto the outside world? How are you going to move forward in the outside world? And this last quarter moon is giving you the impulse, and it's also giving you the impulse to look for concrete results. It's not enough to just sort of bask in your own glory and how wonderful you are. Yeah, I'm sure you are wonderful, but where are the results? And I think that with Moon in Taurus, I think it's going to be very important for you to get these results and part of that process is just going to be, through sheer willpower. I think, once you've decided you want something, Leo, I think, there really is a very real chance that you're able to get hold of it. And so, use that power. And, additionally, I think that you come over, as you have been over the last few weeks, as someone who is, who is quite charismatic. You're projecting a certain attractiveness, and you look good, you feel good, and that really can, make all the difference. So, yeah, it is certainly looking good. Now, one aspect we have is we have Venus. We have Venus making a quincunx to the North Node, and it makes this quincunx to the North Node just before it changes sign. So, Venus, starts the day right at the end of Virgo, and right at the end of Virgo, quincunx to North Node could be just a feeling that something is not quite right. I mean, it's not going to spoil your day, I don't think. No, it's nothing like that. But you should be making an effort with the North Node now in Aquarius to be spending some time, considering other people's perspective and also other people's vulnerability. And it could be with Venus quincunx and North Node, something you do or something you say could make people feel a bit vulnerable. And your first impulse is to think, well, fine, you just pointed something out. It's the way it has to be. But I think if you think about things again, I think that there is a place for a degree of subtlety, and I think you should make a special effort to be aware of other people's weaknesses. Virgo, we have the moon in Taurus. We kind of have the Venus in Virgo, sort of, but only just. So it's kind of good that we start the day with both the moon and Venus in Earth signs. Things are certainly grounded, and you feel that you, broadly speaking, understand things, and you don't have to go too deeply into things. You just look at the way things are presented. Just look at the details, and the details should tell you what you need to know. And so that is certainly good. But Venus is really on the verge of leaving your sign, and really is. So if, for example, you are in the UK or Europe or Africa, this evening Venus leaves Virgo and it moves into Libra, and that might be a bit of a shame. I mean, it was nice having Venus in Virgo, having Venus in your sign. I hope you were able to make the most of it. It should have allowed you to really project your personality, and you could in your own way have become quite sort of influential, and your people skills were by and large pretty good, although maybe at times you were perhaps a little bit too focused on non-essential details. But then Venus moving into Libra, it just means that Venus is out of your sign, and it could be the case that your ability to deal with other people, may not be quite as good as it was, and you might have to try a bit harder. And there is another side to Venus moving into Libra. I mean, Venus is moving into its own sign. And so Venus moving into the sign following Virgo, which is, of course, Libra, that might mean that, your priorities change. And you're not just thinking about yourself, but you're thinking about, what you have, what you don't have. And that then might be about, financial equilibrium. Do you have enough? If you don't have enough, well, what are you going to do about it? And between now and September the 10th, so just over a month, Venus is moving through Libra. On September the 10th, Venus does move into Scorpio. But while Venus is moving into Libra, because Venus is in its own sign, it is a time to be thinking and talking about money, not being afraid to mention money. Money, well, the subject, it can be a dirty subject, can't it? People don't want to discuss it. It's just beneath them. But I think you'll know how to discuss it. You'll be able to sort of get the balance right. And the things you say about money, I think it'll make a lot of sense. And I think that you'll be helped, Virgo, by the fact that right now you have just a good understanding of the way the economy is working. You understand, that balance between, if you like, growth and recession. Not just growth and a recession in terms of, the government and government finances, but just in terms of, your own community. Different communities have different economic pressures. I was at a city council meeting. As I attend city council meetings, just see what's going on, see what the council members have to say. And for example, this part of Washington State, they're concerned about the local economy. It's maybe contracting more than in other parts of the US, and there's a question of why that might be happening. Those are the kind of things that you're able to think about. And if there is a contraction in your local economy, or even an expansion in your local economy, or new opportunities coming up, then I think, Virgo, you're just going to be very aware. You'll just have a natural awareness. So it's actually quite a good time to be looking out for opportunities, and also trying to understand where the business cycle is. And we're all influenced by the business cycle, even if we're not in business. Do people feel poor? Do people feel rich? Do they have surplus money? It can affect all of us. And so you, Virgo, you really do understand it all. It really does make a lot of sense to you. So that can help align you to your environment, align you to the collective, and can sort of put you in a position where you can weather any storms that might come your way. Storms, economic storms, financial storms, things happening in society that might feel really destabilizing. But I think, Virgo, you understand it all. You understand which direction things are all going, and I think that you can therefore take the appropriate steps to not just protect yourself, but perhaps to find new opportunities. Libra. Well, Libra, the big event is, of course, Venus moving into your sign. That happens today. Okay, it might happen tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand, or perhaps parts of Asia, but definitely parts of Asia. So this sign change, Venus moving into Libra, it takes place London time. I think it's at 8:13 this evening. So if you're in the Americas, it's going to be earlier. I make it that it's going to be at 3:13 in the afternoon if you're in New York, or the Eastern Standard Time, at 12:13 in the afternoon, before lunch if you're in California. So that is certainly an important change. And Venus stays in Libra until September the 10th. I think it leaves Libra and goes into Scorpio, I think at 9:07 a.m. on September the 10th. So you've got over a month. of Venus in its own sign. And, this does mean, Libra, that, you should be in a good position. And, it is important that you make the most of it. And, one reason you should make the most of it is because of what happens afterwards. Because, Venus's position, right now is good. But the question is, how long is it going to stay good? And so, we need to think about perhaps some key dates. So I've just said on September the 10th, Venus moves out of Libra and into Scorpio. So what that means is Venus moves out of its own sign and into a sign of its detriment. Venus rules Taurus. It's in its detriment in Scorpio. Venus, all things being equal, doesn't like being in Scorpio. And then on October the 3rd, Venus goes retrograde. So Venus is not just going to be in Scorpio, the sign of its detriment, it's going to be retrograde. And, that's not great. It's also going to be quite close to the sun. So it's going to be combust. So it's perhaps then important, Libra, that you just make the most of what's happening right now. Now that Venus is in a good position in its own sign, there's no time like the present. Make your position as strong as you can. That way, if things go awry, later on into the northern hemisphere, autumn, you're going to be prepared and you're going to be strong enough to weather the storm. Okay, I'm not saying it has to be a storm, but there's just going to be a time when you're not going to be on the greatest of forms. I mean, of course, I will be discussing this when the time comes. So really try to make it happen, Libra, with Venus in your sign. Venus is a benefic. It's in your sign, and it's going to be doing some great stuff in Libra. Venus will, for example, be making a sextile to Jupiter, pretty soon. In fact, in about a week. It's also sooner than that. It's going to be making a grand trine, Venus trine Uranus, Venus trine Pluto. So it's now all starting to happen. So I think, Libra, it's really important that you make the most of it. And at the same time, Libra, I think that your mind is going to be really sparkling. I think you're going to be on really good form. I think that you'll have, all sorts of ideas and inspirations, and there'll be things you want to talk about that, could be really exciting. And if people listen to you, they can be excited as well. So it's probably not a good time to be hiding things. Okay. You might say, well, today the moon is in late Taurus, so it could be that you feel that you want to delay for a little bit. But tomorrow, Friday, the moon moves into Gemini, and so when the moon moves into Gemini, I think that Friday is actually going to be a great day. I was looking at Friday. It's quite impressive. Friday. I was thinking of pressing the button to launch my membership channel on Friday. I was thinking about going for 6:06 a.m. tomorrow because I think things were really buzzing, and so I don't know whether it was worth my while really going for that precise time, but it kind of makes a lot of sense. So I've been thinking about that, and so tomorrow, you've got Moon in Gemini, and so. I think things are going to be good today, Libra, but I think they're going to be even better tomorrow. So I think that there is really, a lot to be optimistic about, and don't make it too complicated. I mean, it's not necessary. Some Librans will be thinking, well, what is the point? Things really are complicated if you start to take action. If you take a step forward, you've got to deal with all the complications, the bureaucracy, the paperwork, whatever. So sure, you can come up with all sorts of reasons why you shouldn't, but there are plenty of reasons why you should. Take a step forward and just make the most of everything. Because with Venus moving into Libra, I think that things are looking pretty good. Scorpio. Mars is making a 72-degree aspect to Saturn. You might say that that is the main aspect of the day. It's Mars quintile Saturn. And, when you hear the word Saturn, you might think, oh, well, that's bad news. Mars and Saturn, have a rather difficult reputation, that pair of planets. But actually, I think Mars quintile Saturn, for you, Scorpio, could actually be quite a good aspect, because it's a quintile. It's about what you are able to create, with your willpower. So you've got Mars in Gemini, quintile Saturn in Aries. Remember, a quintile is 72 degrees. So 72 degrees, that is 60 degrees. Sextile plus 12 degrees. You can do a check. There's Saturn, 14 degrees Aries. We add 60 degrees. Sextiles, the exact sextile would be 14 degrees Gemini. We add 12 degrees onto that, and that takes us to 26 degrees. And so this quintile is really, the kind of impression you're trying to give, what you are trying to do, what you are trying to create, the kind of approach you are trying to create. And so what you are trying to do, Mars is your ruler. You're trying to integrate Saturn. You're trying to make Saturn part of your daily life. And it's not a natural thing to want to do. That is often the nature of a quintile. A quintile can be quite contrived. You're having to make the real effort. And Scorpio, perhaps what you're trying to do is you're trying to make the effort to perhaps be hyper-organized. You want to be in control. You want to be the one to make the final decision. You want to be the one who moves things around, and you want to be in control of everything. And it's sometimes if things are getting chaotic, they're moving without your permission. Maybe things have legs, or they develop legs. They just move around. You don't know how they do that, but they just do it. And you're perhaps taking a view, Scorpio, that enough is enough. This has got to stop. You have to do something about it. And so if you have an idea, if you have a vision, of the way things really should be put together, then now's the time to perhaps execute that vision. And in the process, you might come over as being quite tough. You might want to deliberately come over as being tough, and that might be a good idea. You're giving the right impression. You're coming over as someone who is indeed serious and maybe a little bit sort of uncompromising, and that's certainly an approach, and I think it's quite a good approach. And at the same time, we have got a last quarter moon. The lunar cycle is coming to an end, just a week left. And when you've got a last quarter moon, that means that the sun and the moon are 90 degrees from one another. So we have got the moon in Taurus square the sun in Leo. So the sun in Leo, we've talked a lot about the sun in Leo. I think sun in Leo is obviously strong. The sun is in its own sign. It's close to a 45 degree or 135 degree aspect to the Aries point, and with the sun in Leo, you kind of feel that there are things that you most certainly want to move forward with. But there's something holding you up, something you're not entirely happy about, and that's a square with to the moon. And now the moon is in Taurus, and it's in your opposite sign, and so that might mean that you're of the view that there are certain people out there who are maybe holding you back. They seem to be quite resistant to change. They have their own ideas about the way things should be moving. And yeah, you might find that annoying. It might seem to be a deadlock situation. And, once Scorpio gets into a deadlock situation, it can be difficult because, who is going to step down? But with this square between the moon and the sun, it's important to discuss things, and also to be aware of, or at least ask yourself, what is someone's role? Different people have a different role, and you might misconstrue what someone is doing. You might regard someone as just being in the way, as being just completely unhelpful, but maybe they are doing something useful. So, don't jump to conclusions about what people are doing. And what appears to be something that appears to damage your interests might actually do the opposite. So don't fall into the trap with this moon square sun of being too inflexible, and see other possibilities. Recognize that there are ways around the issue, and that all the while, as I've been recommending over the last few days, or maybe even longer, is that you take a positive approach. You see everything as an opportunity, even if it seems on the surface to be a real problem, someone being intransigent, blocking your path. But yeah, maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe, strangely, someone is acting in your interest, believe it or not. And maybe a bit of delay, even a bit of frustration, might in some strange way, Scorpio, be quite good for you. And perhaps the way you have been moving forward recently, the way you've been construing your various ambitions, just needs to be fine-tuned. And being in a situation where you're at odds with another person might actually give you an opportunity to have another look at what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. And you might then find, Scorpio, that some adjustments, could be very useful. Sagittarius. Well, Sagittarius, you do have a very strong sense of who you are and what you want, how you want everything to unfold. And once you've made a decision about something, well, you would just like to plow on, make it happen. And I think, Sagittarius, that you're quite prepared to push yourself, perhaps, to sort of push yourself quite hard, and it might be a sense of a vision of perfection. But the question is, how good can it really be? Can you be completely perfect? It may be that it's just okay to be sort of 90% of the way. It doesn't have to be, the finished item. And if a few mistakes have been made, if things aren't perfect, it probably doesn't matter. But the moon is in Taurus, and with the moon in Taurus, you're quite capable of being quite stubborn. You might just take the view that there is really just one way of doing things, and that one way of doing things, well, has to be done properly. And there's no such thing as second best. There's no such thing as an alternative strategy. And so you might get stuck if you're not careful, because you're just focusing on just one thing to the exclusion of all else, and you might, for some reason, Sagittarius, just remove all your options. In reality, you might have 10 options, but you've decided you've only got one option, and so maybe you need to be a bit more reasonable. And as far as being reasonable is concerned, well, I think it helps that Venus is moving into Libra. So that happens, this afternoon in the Americas, this evening in sort of Europe, Africa, And with Venus moving into Libra, it, in a way, it does take some of the pressure off you. Maybe you're not quite so concerned about getting things absolutely right, not quite so concerned about ensuring that you gain maximum benefit from other people. There was something a little bit transactional about Venus in Virgo, even for you, Sagittarius. Looking at how you benefit from knowing someone, how you benefit from being nice to someone, and so forth. Well, Venus moving into Libra, does kind of change that. And I think you can become sort of more relaxed. And with Venus in Libra, that might say something about friendship. You are quite capable of being sociable, and with Venus in Libra, that may say that some of the people are on quite good form, and I think you might find out very quickly that they're on good form, because Venus is, when it moves into Libra, it makes a trine to Uranus, it makes a trine to Pluto, and it goes on to make a sextile to Jupiter. So Venus sextile Jupiter, that is an aspect to look forward to. Now, you're not quite there yet. I mean, it's off the top of my head, I think the Venus sextile Jupiter is it's about a week's time, something like that. But really, the moment Venus moves into Libra, it starts to make that sextile to Jupiter, and in the end it will make a sextile to the Sun as well. So that sign change is pretty good, and I think that you can benefit from other people. So you're still going to be transactional to a certain point, but it may just be that you shouldn't be thinking about results, and you should just be thinking about maybe basking in other people's company. That would certainly be a very good way of dealing with Venus moving through Libra. But when we're talking about Venus moving through Libra, I mean, a very simple way of looking at Venus moving through Libra is just being about harmony. What you feel happy about, where do you feel good, and with Venus moving through Libra, you just might have a concept of where you feel good. What activities make you feel good? What would you like to be doing on a permanent basis? Even how would you like to be spending the rest of your life? Because certain things nurture you. You feel good about them. They feel as if they're just part of your overall destiny, and it's not about money or success or recognition. You're just doing something that you are well suited for. And I think while Venus is moving through Libra, I think that can give you powerful insights in terms of how you should be aligning yourself to your future. And I mean future in quite a distant way. We have a future, we have an idea about where we are best suited to be, and what activities we're best suited to be doing. And I think you have that idea. And I think that with Venus moving through Libra, you are actively seeking harmony and long-term harmony for yourself. So I think you can move in the right direction in terms of finding your place, and finding something that you just feel really good about, and you feel you can just keep doing it forever. That might be how it feels, and that certainly what you should be aiming for. Capricorn, things are happening. We have Venus moving into Libra. Venus is moving into a cardinal sign, and this is good news. You really resonate to the cardinal sign. Being a cardinal sign yourself, of course, the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, and Libra. And with Venus moving through Libra, it is a time when you should be feeling pretty good about yourself, about what you can do, how you can present yourself. Yes, Capricorn, I think that you can actually present yourself extremely well. Think about, what other people are looking for, what they find to be pleasing, and things like how you dress, how you talk, the kind of impression you're giving. It all counts, but you know how to carry it off. Don't doubt yourself. Now, being a Capricorn, it's a sign that, in many respects is quite sort of modest. You don't like to do things just for show. You're someone who is quite sincere. You want to be authentic, and you're trying to, pretend to be someone you're not. That doesn't really suit you. But it might be a time where appearances do actually count for something. Okay, it's not the case that style is more important than substance, but I think that style can complement substance, particularly now with Venus moving through Libra. And of course, Venus does continue moving through Libra until I think September the 10th, when it moves into Scorpio. Do think ahead, to the next month, to how you want to project yourself, because right now I think you can really project yourself very well. And in terms of the specifics, if you are an ambitious Capricorn, then now is a time to be thinking about your ambitions. It's okay to be ambitious. If you want to get something off the ground, now you can. If you want to impress someone in authority who has power, you can. If you're looking for a job or a new position, then it's worth giving it a go, giving it your best shot, because Venus is a benefic. It's in its own sign, and I really think that it can be helpful. Furthermore, Capricorn, you have the capacity to really make things happen, to really assert yourself. And it's not through anything particularly spontaneous. No, it's because, we have a quintile between Mars and Saturn. So, Saturn is, of course, your ruler. So Mars quintile Saturn is that, through your own efforts and through your own planning, you can bring the Mars energy, down to earth. You can make it very much part of, how you present yourself. And so if you want to come over as being someone dynamic, full of action, full of ideas, you can if you want. Also with Mars quintile Saturn, if you want to come over as someone who's very tough and determined, then likewise, it's possible. In fact, coming over as being someone tough and determined might actually suit your purposes very well. At some level, that's what people are looking for. And if you have a certain grimness to you, even if it's not real, even if deep down you're kind of feeling a bit more relaxed about things, a bit of grimness and determination, I think can go a long way. And, all the while, like I was saying yesterday, I think Capricorn, it is a time when you are actually quite sensitive. I think you are understanding a lot of different things, and you can gather information from many sources. You can certainly listen to what people are saying, but you can also look at the signs. The signs are everywhere. The signs of the future are perhaps everywhere, and you just have to open your eyes to it. And it's okay. There's a material side to it, but there's also an emotional side to it. Picking up on other people's emotions, picking up on other people's worries, and if you are feeling worried about something, it's quite likely that the reason you're feeling worried about it is because other people are worried about it as well, and so if you are worried about something, you're getting an idea about the broad trends. You're getting an idea about the spirit of the times, the zeitgeist, and so you can perhaps benefit from that. Perhaps you can utilize other people's worries. and it can at the very least inform you about what is going on, and you can sort of go into things with your eyes open. You really see what is going on, and I think that you get a powerful insight into people's fears. And today we have a last quarter moon. The moon is in Taurus, and it's making a square to the sun in Leo. And this last quarter moon, I think it might be telling you to maybe lighten up a bit. I mean, the sun in Leo is just a bit intense, and it's kind of opposition Pluto. I mean, well, okay, the opposition is pretty wide. It's 10-degree opposition, but it's also the sun is conjunct Jupiter. So yeah, you could just take things just a little too seriously. I think that it's all just sort of hard work. But the square from Moon in Taurus is perhaps telling you to just get real. Don't take things so seriously. Don't just dwell in some sort of emotional fortress. You really can, bring things down to earth and perhaps enjoy yourself in quite an earthy way. Maybe that is what the last quarter moon is kind of advocating, because somehow you've got to, maybe lighten up, and at the very least address yourself to the real world. I mean, I think Venus moving into Libra says something about the world and you wanting to have an impact, but Moon in Taurus is kind of telling you about the world in a different way. It is a material world. It is a physical world. And, you're a Capricorn, you're an earth sign. It's something that you should appreciate. And that's what the Moon in Taurus wants you to do. Aquarius. You might find today that you're a little bit rooted to the spot. At least that's your first inclination. You're not moving around, not feeling that there's anything that you must do, anywhere that you must go to. You can be happy to an extent, where you are. Why bother? And if something is overly complicated, maybe you just want to just bring it down to earth and relate it to your own part of the world, your own experiences. And the Moon in Taurus is making a square to the sun. Of course, the sun is in Leo, and the sun is in Leo is in your opposite sign. And so that moon square sun might actually say something about relationships. And certain relationships may seem a little perplexing. It could be you're dealing with someone, sun in Leo, who is quite strongly placed, but they're not giving anything away, and that might be frustrating. And the moon in Capricorn is kind of just it's asking you to hold firm, and it might be that your approach and another person's approach, maybe it's a partner, could be someone you know very well, but your approach, their approach, they may be at odds with one another. I mean, you certainly value the importance of stability and making sure that everything is in order, everything is under control, and you might therefore be slightly concerned by the way another person is behaving, but you're not quite sure how to deal with the situation. But honestly, Aquarius, if you want to assert yourself, if you want to make an impact, you can. It really isn't going to be difficult. It's not natural, but if you make a decision that something has to be done, you want to force the pace, you can just make it happen, and you do it in a way that is quite planned. You look at what you're dealing with, you look at the problem, and you plan a strategy, and you give the impression of being assertive, even perhaps a little bit aggressive, and you give that impression, and I think it'll work very well. I mean, it might seem a little bit fake, but I do think, Aquarius, that you will be able to get away with it. Pisces. Well, Pisces, we have Venus moving into Libra, and the question is, well, is that relevant to you? Venus moving into Libra. Well, Venus in Libra is in its own sign, and Venus is a planet which has a special relationship to Pisces, because Venus is exalted in Pisces, and so when Venus moves into Libra, that might say something about you when that sign change happens. I mean, I know that Venus is not your ruler; Jupiter is your ruler, but still, I think you might experience something when Venus moves into Libra. It's like feeling that you need to be, just more rational. I mean, Venus is an air sign, and you don't want to just get over emotional about things, and perhaps as far as is possible, you might want to sort of talk things through, but you're not going to lose any of your seriousness. I mean, in fact, there is something quite serious about Venus moving into Libra, at least from a Piscean horoscope, from a Piscean perspective. You know that some things are serious and they need to be thought through. They need to be talked about in a serious way. And while it's important to maintain a harmonious environment, it can't be too harmonious if you're dealing with serious issues. And if something has to be dealt with, and there are disagreements and different approaches, and people have different emotional states, that does require some seriousness. And you yourself, deep down, are quite serious. There are things that you want. You really want to make certain things happen, and you have a powerful sense of yourself, and also a certain sense of your own destiny. If you feel you have a destiny, then you feel that you're going to want to see this destiny through. You don't want to have anyone hold you up. If something's meant to be, it's meant to be. And so if you just keep in mind what you are trying to achieve, and you don't allow yourself to let go of it, you don't allow yourself to be knocked off course, and you keep trying, you keep moving, then Pisces, I think that you are going to really make quite a powerful impression. And I do think that Venus in Libra is going to help. I think Venus in Libra is going to give you the ability to perhaps even sort of just explain to yourself what is going on, and at the same time it will allow you to sort of maintain your inner balance while you might be dealing with some issues which could be serious, but they're not going to be too serious, and they'll be just right for you. You'll be able to handle it, and so don't worry about Venus moving into Libra. In fact, I think Venus in Libra could be a real bonus for you. And of course, once Venus moves into Libra, it starts making a sextile to Jupiter, and Venus sextile Jupiter, that's a good aspect. In fact, you might say that the moment Venus moves into Libra, you kind of start feeling that sextile between Venus and Jupiter, and it's an aspect that does allow you to really sort of get things together on many different levels. And I'm sure I'll be talking about this aspect pretty soon. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it is time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 31, which is influence. This is what many of us are trying to achieve. We're trying to have an influence. We want to be taken seriously. If we say something, we assume that people will listen and that they will hopefully, act accordingly. But the question is, to what extent are we going to actually be able to have an influence? And it might actually be, harder than we think. And this is certainly reflected by the moving lines. We have two lines moving, the third line and the sixth line. Now, the third line moving means that in terms of influence, there is this question about, who is influencing who and how we are responding to not just our own environment, but also ourselves. Maybe it's our egos. And, if we decide we want something, then we might feel that we just have to get it. So we might be overly influenced by passing whims. It should be a passing whim, but we might find ourselves suddenly we want something on the spur of a moment. We just want it. We want it now, and we didn't want it 5 minutes ago, but it just suddenly occurs to us we must have it. We must have it. Absolutely must have it, and we could give in to this, and so there's a lot of temptation around actually, and if we do things without thinking it through, having these sudden desires, being influenced, overly influenced by ourselves, by our unconscious, by some passing fad, that would not be a good thing. I mean, we're not going to be successful because in a way we've lost our center. I mean, we should be centered in terms of, of the way we behave. But if our centering comes from elsewhere, we are influenced by, things going on around us. We worry about what other people are worrying about. We just get nervous by what other people are being nervous about. So we just are in a state of just responding. And when we feel we have to act, somehow have to act to relieve the tension, that's not very healthy. And so, we do have to kind of resist that temptation. And then the top line moves. We certainly, with the top line, feel that there's stuff that has to be done. We want to have an influence. But, the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching indicates that we might try to assert our influence by talking. Just talking. And the Wilhelm translation, it doesn't say that that's good. It doesn't say that it's bad. It just says, well, it is what it is. It's just talking. And it is just words. And if you think you can influence someone or something just with words, you might be mistaken. You might find that you can say whatever you like, but it's just not going to have an impact. And, there is a possibility, it being the top line, that, we've tried to be subtle. We've tried to, build up our influence slowly, but suddenly at the top line, we just can't help ourselves. We try our hardest. We really try to have an impact. And kind of the more we try, the less it works. And I'm afraid this leads to the second hexagram, the third line, sixth line moves. Where does that take us to? Well, it takes us to hexagram number 12, which is standstill. So in spite of all our efforts, in spite of all our desires to make an impact, I don't think so. And I think that's probably for the best, standstill. We need to accept that short-term things are just not with us. There's just not the movement that we're looking for. and people could be really set in their ways, and I think that just has to be accepting. A standstill is talking about people who are perhaps working at quite a low level. They have their own desires, and they're not going to compromise, and perhaps the wrong people are in control, and it's not a situation where we can have an influence. And so, if we're in a situation where we can't have an influence, however much we try, I think we just need to accept that situation and just move away, and just watch it from afar. Just not get tied up with what these supposed inferior people are doing. When I say inferior people, this is just I Ching language. They're not really inferior in a broad sense, but just in terms of the matter at hand, they might seem to be kind of not on our level. And so, I think it just might be short-term a case of, disengaging. But, today's Thursday, tomorrow's Friday, things might be very different tomorrow. And that's all I've got to say for this week. Thank you very much for listening to this video. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.